Rumor of a Werewolf. Written by Eddie Jones. Performed by Zane Van Wicklin. Published by Illuminate YA.
So get ready, because today we're going deep into a real-life mystery. And you guessed it, it's in Sleepy Hollow, the town practically famous for its spooky legends.
Oh, you've really outdone yourself with these sources this time.
Well, you know me.
We've got news clippings about some pretty strange happenings, a young adult novel excerpt set in Sleepy Hollow today that kind of mirrors those events, and we even have what look like firsthand accounts from people.
Yeah, I love a good mystery, and this one has layers.
It does.
So we're on a mission here to figure out if there's any truth to these rumors of a werewolf terrorizing Sleepy Hollow, and if so, who or what is really behind it all.
This is going to be fascinating. We're going to have to be very careful, though, not to let the fictional narrative, influence how we interpret the real-world event. So what jumps out at you from those news reports?
Well, the first victim, Candace Brenneman, her case is just chilling. I mean, she was found dead under a bridge, ripped throat, a full moon, defensive wounds on her hands, and get this, large paw prints were found nearby.
It definitely paints a vivid picture, doesn't it? I can see why people jump to the werewolf idea. But we do need to look at other possibilities too, of course.
Exactly. I mean, could a large dog have done that, inflicted those injuries? And was there anyone in Candace's life who might have wanted to harm her?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The news reports mention a missing person, Robert Brogard, who disappeared the next full moon. And so now people are really freaked out, thinking there's a pattern.
Right, and that fear is contagious, right?
Oh, yeah.
But then the plot thickens, because the second body they find isn't Brogard, it's a homeless person.
Now, that really throws a wrench into that whole werewolf theory, doesn't it? Makes you wonder if we're dealing with two separate events here, or if there's some kind of connection we're just not seeing.
Totally. And while Brogard is still missing, let's maybe shift gears for a second to some of those potential suspects that pop up in that fictional excerpt. We've got Mitchell Kraft, the chef at the restaurant where Candace worked. He's the one who found her body, and he even claims that he saw a large canine.
Ah, the unreliable witness. So do we trust him?
Well, he says he was with Marilyn Frost that night. She's the restaurant manager, also knew Candace.
Okay.
But the excerpt says that there's security footage showing that Marilyn wasn't at the restaurant when Kraft said she was. So that puts a big hole in his alibi.
Ooh, good catch. So Kraft might be hiding something. Or even worse, involved somehow. Does anyone else stand out as suspicious in that story?
Yeah, definitely. Butch Prescott, he was Candace's old boss at the gym.
Okay.
He's another one to watch. I mean, not only did he identify her body, but we learned that Candace left his gym to go work for a competitor. So maybe a motive there.
Jealousy? Revenge? It's definitely possible. So we've got multiple suspects here, each with their own secrets and potential motives. But now I'm curious about that young protagonist. What was his name? Nick Caden.
Yeah.
Who's visiting his grandfather in Sleepy Hollow and gets pulled into this whole werewolf thing. What's his role in this story?
He's kind of like the audience, he's experiencing this mystery firsthand. And he's not alone, which is where it gets kind of funny. He ends up teaming up with this group of amateur sleuths. They call themselves the 70s TV detectives. They're all dressed up like, Starsky and Hutch and Kojak, all those guys.
That's hilarious. Talk about adding like a meta layer to this whole investigation.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Like the story's sort of winking at us at how obsessed we are with those classic detective tropes. But then it gets even wilder. Nick ends up going to see this character named Sunbear. He's an expert on the Wendigo.
Now, for those who may not know, the Wendigo is a creature from Native American folklore, often described as this malevolent spirit with a crazy hunger for human flesh. Kind of a creepy parallel to the werewolf, don't you think?
Totally. So now we're presented with a possible supernatural explanation for these attacks, which adds a whole new dimension to the story.
For sure. And it seems like Nick takes this supernatural threat pretty seriously. So tell me, what happens with his investigation?
Well, armed with this new information, he sets out to track down the werewolf himself. And his search takes him to, you guessed it, a cave. Classic horror movie setting, right? Inside, he finds what seems to be evidence. Tattered clothing, a bed of leaves. Things are getting real now.
Oh, I bet. And I'm guessing that sense of danger only escalates when Nick is suddenly confronted by the werewolf and an accomplice.
Yeah, it's a total heart-stopping moment. And that's where the story takes a completely unexpected turn.
It makes you wonder how much of what we think we see is actually shaped by, our own expectations and fears.
Right. And the story really drives home how important critical thinking is and paying attention to details because, as we find out, it's Nick's careful observation that exposes the truth.
Well, what's so impressive is that Nick was able to pick up on these tiny little details that everyone else just completely overlooked, like there was a discrepancy in the timestamp of a social media post.
Hmm.
And he also noticed some inconsistencies in a couple of the witness statements.
It really goes to show you that sometimes, the most important clues, they're hiding in plain sight.
Right.
We get so focused on the big picture that we miss those subtle little hints.
Yeah. It's a great lesson in critical thinking, and not just for, solving mysteries, but for everyday life, too.
Yeah.
Don't just take things at face value. Question, observe, analyze.
I also like how this fictional excerpt weaves in actual historical figures and events. There are mentions of Washington Irving and the old Dutch church cemetery. It adds another layer of intrigue to the whole thing, kind of blurs the lines between fact and fiction even more.
Right. By, grounding the story in those familiar landmarks and local history, the author creates this really eerie sense of, authenticity. And suddenly, those old Sleepy Hollow legends feel a lot more real.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially when the story kind of delves into that world of folklore and urban legends. Like with Nick's encounter with Sunbear, the Wendigo expert, it's almost like the story is acknowledging that even though there might be a perfectly rational explanation, there's always that possibility,
Mm-hmm.
of something more, something ancient and primal.
It's that ambiguity, that space between what we know and what we don't know, that makes the story so captivating. And speaking of blurred lines, what did you think about the 70s TV detectives?
Oh, I love them.
I mean, they're like walking, talking metaphors for how obsessed we are with, mystery and detective tropes.
Oh, they're brilliant. I mean, they add humor, but they also kind of make you think about how we often try to force things to fit into those neat little pre-existing narratives that we have, even when those narratives might not be accurate. It reminds us to be aware of our own biases.
For sure. I mean, we love a good mystery. We love a clear-cut villain and a nice, neat resolution. But real life, it's rarely that simple.
Speaking of real life, we have those potential witness accounts to think about, too. There's the story of Sarah Lindsay, the young girl who said she saw this, wolf-like creature attacking her dog. They even made a police sketch.
Oh, wow.
Talk about adding fuel to the werewolf fire.
Oh, yeah. I mean, eyewitness accounts can be so powerful,
Yeah.
especially when they kind of tap into those existing fears and beliefs that people already have.
And that brings us right back to Nick, who somehow manages to cut through all of the noise and actually find the truth. But I think what I find so interesting is that even though the mystery is solved, the story leaves you with this lingering feeling of unease. We never find out what happened to that wolf dog, right? And then there are all those elements of the supernatural, like the Wendigo and the story of King Nebuchadnezzar, that are just kind of left hanging there.
That's the genius of this story, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we get a satisfying conclusion to the immediate mystery.
Yeah.
But those bigger questions, about whether unseen forces are at work, they're left open-ended.
It's like the story is saying that the world is a vast and mysterious place, and there are things we might never fully understand. Makes you wonder what other hidden truths are out there right under our noses.
Definitely sparks the imagination, doesn't it?
Mm.
It challenges us to look beyond what's obvious, to question our assumptions, and to be okay with not knowing everything.
And I think that's something we can all benefit from, no matter where we are or what mysteries we're trying to solve. So to wrap things up, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this deep dive into the Sleepy Hollow werewolf?
I'd say it's this. The world is a fascinating and complicated place, and it's full of wonder and deception. So approach it with a sense of curiosity, a healthy dose of skepticism, and always, always keep asking questions. You never know what truths you might discover.
And maybe, just maybe, there really is a little bit of magic out there.